I collect, play, and export old video games. It was a hobby of mine. I would find old games, port them into playable versions for the modern age, and I would share them online. It was a lot of fun to find something and to get it out there. A lot of times I would help people find a game they never even heard of before. Sure, a lot of the games weren't very good, but there was still value in playing bad games or in playing games with outdated references and states. There was a lot of lost games, for the most part. Back in the 2730s, 40s, and 50s, there were a lot more gaming companies churning out games than there were people to play them. Quite a few gaming companies produced one game before filing for bankruptcy. Sometimes the games they tried to sell were unfinished and would exacerbate other independent companies into failing. Finding those games was tricky, but if you knew where to look and how to look, you would find them. I once found an old arcade game of Striker, a shooter game where the player played as a space alien shooting human soldiers. The game was taken down by the Vigiles Urbani for encouraging treasonous behavior and unpatriotic ideals. So, every game cabinet was supposedly destroyed. I found one in an old arcade in Eden City. Getting that to port into a ROM that was playable online was difficult, but it was worth it to play the game. It was way ahead of its time. And as fun as my hobby was, it was getting harder to find an actually lost game. Digging through flea markets, pawn shops, and literal dumps trying to find a cartridge of a game that was produced by one company who only made 1,000 copies is quite tedious when the only thing to show for it is red eyes, cut hands, and a stink that takes an hour to wash off. Still, though, I kept looking, hoping to find a rare hidden picture game or an adventure game no one ever heard of. My job, thankfully, required me to travel a lot and gave me enough free time to check the local sites. It was on one of these trips in Cathedral City I happened to be driving by a junk sale. You're probably familiar with junk sales. People trying to get rid of the things in their house, so they set up a table or two on their front lawn and they try to sell it to anyone who wants it. Usually clothes, coffee mugs, or other similar items. But I saw from my car that there were piles of cases and even a few old game systems. Fascinated, I pulled over and I checked out the cases. There must have been hundreds of games in those boxes, all with the labels facing upwards, thank goodness. Whoever owned these games must have been a major gamer and been one for a long time. I saw an original Ping game, one of the very first video games ever created. The old woman sitting by the table saw my interest, so she struck up a conversation with me. You're a big fan of video games? My son is too, but since he moved to Eden City, I had to get rid of some of his old crap. He kept telling me, don't get rid of it, it'll be valuable someday. But that never happened. Even tried having a few games appraised, but they're all worthless, she said. Oh yeah, I bet. But maybe there's a few I might like. But it's usually hard to sell old games. I lied through my teeth as I saw a few games I was hunting down. This old woman really had an original copy of Terminal Trip, Columbus's Crusade, and Goblin's Quest, and she said she was having a hard time selling them. She must have not shown the appraisers everything she had. I grabbed the cases when I saw a curious one that was different from everything else's. Every other case was in its original case. A lot of them were still in their plastic, and a few were in paper cardstock, the truly old games. This one was in a plastic case meant for holding a CD, but instead of a wrapping showing the game, there was an index card taped to the front of it, calling it King Constantine's Cursed Keys. I picked up the case and with care, I opened it. Sure enough, inside was a small booklet that looked untouched and a white disc written on in black marker, calling it King Constantine's Cursed Keys. If this was real, then this would be my holy grail, my magnum opus, the million centime painting bought at a yard sale. Back in 2756, a game studio by the name of White Sun Studios had promised a game that was going to revolutionize everything. A few teased pictures of the game, a promise of a new level of customization, and even a beta test with a single level of the game was released. People were extremely excited to get the game, and when the game was finally finished, White Sun Studios announced that the game was cancelled. The images of the game were pulled from the internet, the beta version was scrubbed, and no one knew why. There were rumors that it was because the Vigiles Urbani found the game offensive in some way, but from what a few former employees said, that wasn't the case. They just said that the CEO of the company canceled it the day before the release. He had every copy destroyed in a massive bonfire, not just the copies of the games, but the hard drives of the computers that made them. The concept art, the script, programming logs, even the booklets explaining the game were all burned. No reason was given, and the CEO would refuse to talk about why. A very strange story that elevated the game to a truly legendary status. The plot that was shared was simple enough. King Constantine was locked away by 6 wardens, and the 6 wardens had to be defeated to free the king. But naturally, rumors persisted that one employee had managed to smuggle out a single copy of the game. Since no copies were ever found, it was assumed the game was completely destroyed. If I had found an actual copy of the game, I would be a legend. White Sun Studios wasn't around anymore, so there was no one left to sue me. Whether the game was a complete masterpiece or a glitch trap didn't matter too much. The very fact that it was the only one and I would be making more would mean the world. I would be connecting people with their nostalgia, and I would be answering a massive what if. What if I actually got to play that game? And even if this wasn't a complete copy and it was somehow just a copy of the single first level, that was still pretty cool too, since that was also inaccessible, even if others had played it. I grabbed the case along with the other games and I asked her, "How much for all these games?" She shrugged. She really had no idea what they were worth. A centie each? I eagerly paid her the 4 centie for the 4 games, and I eagerly went back to my car, driving off to my hotel. It would be a week before I could get home, but I was so excited. This was a great find, and I could almost vibrate with excitement about that fact. Even though I couldn't play the game myself, I eagerly read over the booklets in the games. Sure enough, they were in mint condition. Older games used to include booklets that would explain gameplay, along with some lore and sometimes cheat codes. I scanned the booklets page by page, and I uploaded them to my old games forum. That generated a bit of chatter. When I uploaded the scans of King Constantine's Cursed Keys booklet, it exploded. People were eager to figure out if what I found was real, if I was going to play it, or if I was going to share it. I reassured them I would share it as soon as I could. I just needed them to be patient. They were even more excited than I was, but we would see where it was going to go. After scanning the pages, I read them over to get a chance to see if I could get any hints on how the game was played or what it was about. Welcome to the kingdom of Ravenshaven. The good King Constantine had 7 good knights called wardens, who he gave a piece of his kingdom to guard and protect over. However, 6 of his wardens turned on him and locked him away in his deepest dungeon using 6 cursed keys. Play as the last warden, loyal to the king, as you face the 6 evil wardens. Battle in 6 unique duchies as you try to find the 6 keys. Full of twists and turns, hundreds of quests, and dozens of unique characters to meet. Small actions can have long-reaching consequences. Many different characters also get endings based on your actions. There are 20 different endings for the warden based on your own actions. Even actions that you thought wouldn't have an impact can have big impacts. Be warned though, until the game is finished, it cannot be restarted. The rest of the booklet talked about the controls based on the computer's keyboard and mouse. There were even a few quest examples given, such as discovering the hidden chest in the farmhouse. An old woman in the widow's farm would need your help finding her late husband's chests he had hidden around the farm. She wants you to find 3, but if you find all 5, you get a special prize. The game was sounding like most action RPG games from that era, but still, I wanted to give it a chance. If the game actually delivered, then it was going to make a big difference. I noticed underneath the booklet was a folded piece of notebook paper. I read it over, and I was more confused by it than anything. It said things like left, right, forward, underneath, LBR. Maybe the old owner was trying to finish the game? Well, without knowing the context, I put it back in, and I put the case and booklet away, forgetting about it until I got home. When I got home, I brought the disk to my own special rig, designed to run the old program on a virtual machine and export it into a ROM that was accessible by modern computers. The last thing you wanted to do when working with old games was put it on a modern computer that couldn't even run it. That was before the risk of things like computer viruses or something worse. So with the disk in the rig, I ran a scan, and after 10 minutes, it confirmed that the disk had no viruses on it. So I opened it, and sure enough, it played. It had 2 options, New Game and Settings. Eager with this, I copied the disk into playable ROMs and uploaded them to the forum with this message. A playable version of King Constantine's Cursed Keys. I am exploring this game, so don't ask for cheats or advice. Let's explore together, I said, sending it out to them, and all as I muted it to avoid spoilers, as I started my own quest into the land of Ravenshaven. The first thing it did when selecting New Game was start to play a scrolling text with a narration. Welcome to Ravenshaven. We have known peace for countless millennia. However, 6 of the king's wardens have turned on him, locking him away and leading all of the knights away from the righteous path. Now you have to defeat the 6 wardens to collect their cursed keys and release King Constantine. The text beneath it was odd. It was red on the black background, and it seemed to have been added at a later time. A dark evil is rising in the shadows of our petty conflict. It lives in the darkness and it's growing. Even now it sees you and it prepares to escape. You still have a chance to stop it. Turn off this evil game and burn this game. It's your only chance. A weirdly scary bit of dialogue. Maybe it was like a Feral scare that leaked out early. Some games from this era had scary things hidden in the source code until released when the computer's date matched the 31st of October. Well, it wasn't going to discourage me from playing, and if the game had even more scare tactics like that, then even better. A first Lost game? That kind of stuff was something you always heard as happening to someone else who knew someone else, not something you experienced yourself. So, preparing for a jump scare, I pressed the spacebar as I worked on my character. My warden was a knight in full plate mail, but I was able to decorate the armor and even the flag. When that was done, I began to play the game. The gameplay was pretty straightforward. A real-time combat system where you dealt with wild animals, bandits, and even an occasional monster. In no time at all, I moved on to the first warden. I didn't know what I was expecting from the first boss of the game, but this wasn't it. I saw an old man with gray hair and no helmet, who was barely dragging his sword and shield along with no armor at all. Just a simple tunic, similar to the village NPCs. Stop. Turn back. You don't know what you're doing. The king isn't good. It was quick work to kill this boss and collect the key from his body. That part of the game made me feel more than a little odd. The booklet set it up like it was this big, epic story based game where your actions had consequences, but it felt like a pretty simple sword and sorcery game. I didn't get any quests from NPCs, and nothing seemed to be happening other than fighting and killing. Maybe they sold the game as being a lot more than it was. It wouldn't be the first time, but still, when you spend so much time working towards something, you expect it to be with a satisfactory reward. After obtaining the key, the game pushed me towards a tower deep in the forest. In the forest tower, I found the dungeon, and when I approached the door, the screen changed and showed me an image of a wooden door with 6 locks, 6 candles, and 6 bars on the window. In the window, the only thing I could see were 2 gnarled hands, darkness, and deep in the darkness was 2 green eyes. When I clicked on the window, text appeared indicating that it was King Constantine that was speaking. Thank you, my good warden. Now, unlock one of the locks. All of them need to be unlocked to let me out. I clicked on one of the locks and the lock popped open, and one of the candles was extinguished. This time, King Constantine's text was red when he spoke. Thank you for weakening the chains. Keep on your quest, and with the bit of my power that is released, I will help you on your quest. Free me, or the consequences of my imprisonment will be severe, the king said. I didn't think too much of it. I just moved on to the next few bosses, and they were about as easy as the first one. Old men, barely able to move, fighting me with everything they had. Even basic enemies did bigger damage to my HP than they were. But I did find a few odd things in the game. Things that might be glitches, or more of that Feral programming bleeding through. One of the locations on the map was marked as the Battered Berg. According to the snippet about it, it was once a bustling village, but it recently came under bandit attack, so the villagers were trying to get it all repaired. So there were plenty of jobs for the warden to take care of. When I made it to the battered burg, it was a ruin. Not merely a video game ruin, but it actually looked like it had seen a major war. I don't know how the designers rendered it so well, but they did. The homes were all burned, leaving only stone foundations left over. A few bloodstains marked where people stood. There were twisted metal fragments marking where weapons and tools were, broken beyond all recognition. When I examined the bloodstains or the broken metal, the red text appeared again, describing it. Bloodstain. All that was left of a pathetic villager. You were too late to save them. Twisted metal. You can't tell what it used to be, but it's too dull to kill yourself with. What a shame. As I went through the battered burg, there were no NPCs. No enemies, no events, nothing. It was just 5 minutes of wandering through a ruined village, and dark thoughts filled my mind. Why would they make something like this? Everything in this game felt so straightforward, and while games like this would usually have a meta joke or two, like a soda that would increase your HP by 1 point, and you tell the bartender you need to check your HP. Or you'd find the game's instruction manual within the game itself, and it would be an item giving you infinite power. But a game that would directly make a player face consequences, horror of war, and about how their actions as a player would have massive consequences on the gaming world was a more modern game playing mechanic. Games of this era were not supposed to be this meta. So the fact that I had to spend 5 minutes traveling through devastation to move on was just haunting. It was like passing through an old battlefield. Even though you know the danger was long since past, it still feels like it lingers. When I left the battered burg, I moved back into the forest and started dealing with normal enemies again. That helped me feel better about the battered burg. But away from it, I just shook it off. Maybe the game designers just wanted to do something unique. It certainly was unique, and the game felt normal again as I continued my quest and I took out a couple more bosses, and the game got stranger. I had 5 keys by that point, and the game was barely recognizable. When I tried visiting old locations, most of the shops and houses were closed down. When I tried entering, the red text appeared saying, "Quarantine." The few NPCs that still wandered around mostly ignored me with a dot 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 when I tried to speak with them. But a few were still speaking, and they told me about how a plague was now spreading through the land, and how only King Constantine could save them. But that plague didn't just affect human NPCs. The forest became almost skeletal in nature. Enemies were harder to find, but the few I found were very different. Wolves stopped being dog-like and grew larger, with foam at their mouths, and inspecting their bodies afterwards called them infected wolves. Human enemies had all but ceased, but undead enemies increased immensely. According to the lore of the game, dying without a funeral would result in a zombie. and now they wandered the woods looking for people to slay so they would have more company. I guess the implications was that there were so many deaths and so few funerals that the zombies were infesting the forest. The zombies looked different also. In the beginning of the game, they looked like the human NPCs, just with gray skin, no blood. And when they were finally killed, then their heads would fall off with a femur sticking out of their neck, like something out of a cartoon. The zombies now still had gray skin, but they also had a single eye missing, visible green decomposition, and mold spreading across their skin, and blood dripping from their mouths like drool. And when they were killed, they died in a spurt of blood, and you could see green rot, gray flesh, and red organs all intermingle on the ground. It was pretty gross, but the most unsettling part was what they said. Zombies in the beginning of the game only made a few grunts or moans. Pretty generic, creepy zombie moans. The same moans used in all kinds of games, both small and cheap, and large and expensive. But by the end of the game, the moans became full of words. And please. The zombies were pleading with my character, saying things like, "It hurts. Help me. I don't want this. End me. Save me. Stop this." Things like that. They fought just as aggressively, but still, with their tone and their voices, made me think that they weren't trying to hurt me. They were compelled to fight against their will, and now they were in pain. I always thought of the zombies as being what a human turned into, with nothing left of the human inside. However, these late game zombies were creepy, not because of how they looked, but because of the fact that they were begging for help. Even as I was trying to cut off their head, they were still pleading with me to save them. I didn't feel very heroic killing zombies by that point, so I sought out the last warden. This one lived in a volcano that had no NPCs on it at all, but it also had no enemies, no traps, no environmental hazards, nothing. There was the ambient music and the sounds of the volcano itself, distant lava and crumbling rocks, but as far as I could tell, there was no danger in the volcano, no challenges, no conflict, no lore, nothing. Any gamer will tell you that an area where there is nothing and no danger immediately sets off alarm bells. Every game had to have something. Otherwise, the designers just made an area of the game with a unique premise, but filled it with nothing. After 5 minutes of wandering, I made it to the chamber in the middle of the volcano. There was lava on the sides of the room, and as soon as I entered, a large boulder blocked the only way out. Excited for the final boss fight, I prepared for a fight, and instead, a skeleton dropped from the ceiling, directly on the floor, and nothing else happened. After a few moments, I approached the skeleton and examined the body. In the body was the final key, but the body was skeletal. Examining the body got some more red text. The final warden died of old age a long time ago. All of his loyal followers soon followed suit. After 500 years, the final key has finally been obtained. 500 years? That was really odd. I didn't realize that was a part of the gameplay. It's been 500 years? Was that why there was so much death? Wow, things in this game were really odd. I hope the final key cleared it all up. After I was done examining the final skeleton, I was back at the chamber of King Constantine. The final lock was opened and the last candle was blown out as the door opened. Inside of the chamber was only darkness, but the red text of King Constantine appeared. Come inside my chamber. It's been so long since I've had something to eat. Despite myself, my character was no longer in my control as he walked into the king's chamber. In the dim light, the details of the dungeon began to come into focus. In the center of a circle with a seven-pointed star was a small creature that looked almost like a human, but with red skin, a pair of bat-like wings, big black eyes, curved sharp horns, and long, sharp claws. But I also saw that the creature had a chain around its leg with a lock. Oh yes, great hero of this world. Now, you just have one last lock to unlock. Your own key. Now, set me free and I'll wander around in your world. Anthony. The imp said my name, and I didn't hear it from the game. I heard it behind me. Startled, I turned around and I saw nothing. After giving my heart a few moments to calm down, I turned back to the game. I don't know how the video game got my name, but it had to be a trick of some kind. It was just a game. There was nothing to worry about. Exactly. It's just a game. Now release me. I cannot unlock my own lock. Only you can do that, the imp said, and I tilted my head. What the hell? Exactly. Now, just let me go. If you don't, I'll personally make sure you burn in hell for the rest of eternity, you sorry sack of shit, the imp said. Now frustrated, I reached for the power button and pressed it. Well, don't be rude, I said, leaning back and expecting my computer to turn off. It didn't. I'll be as rude as I want to. You've released most of my power, so now you have a simple choice. Keep me locked up and I make your life a living hell, or you let me go and I become someone else's problem. The game had two text boxes appear. A simple choice. Let the imp go, or let the imp go. Fuck that, I said as I pulled out the power cord from my computer tower, expecting that to work. It didn't. The game still played. Did you really expect that to work? Now make a choice, the imp said, as I turned from my computer and began to walk away, only to find myself facing my computer again. I turned away and found myself facing the screen again. Now desperate, I picked up the screen and threw it on the ground. I saw it shatter, I heard the broken glass, and I could smell the burning plastic. But when I turned back to where it was, the screen was still there, and in perfect shape. You'll never leave this place. I cannot force myself free, but I can force you to share my prison. You will keep the only key out of here, but the only way to let yourself out will free me too. So tell me, will you free me? The imp said with a smile I feared with all of my soul. I tried closing the game. I tried shutting off my computer again. I even tried reaching out to different programs to reach out for help. Nothing worked. The imp really controlled all the exits, and I only had one choice. Why? I asked the imp, and the imp only chuckled. You had to keep playing to find the answer. Well, you have it now. I hovered my mouse over the first option. Let the imp go. Once I clicked it, the screen went dark, and I screamed from the sudden darkness. After a few moments of silence, I realized that the power just went out. In the darkness, though, it felt like something else was watching me in that darkness. I don't know how I got to sleep, or when, but when I woke up, there was power again, and I had to check the forum to see if anyone else had something similar happen to them. When I checked the forum, I found out it was deleted. Even checking my internet history, I couldn't find it. So I tried emailing a few of my friends that I met on the forum that I knew outside of the forum. Each email returned saying that the email address didn't exist. I tried calling, texting. They all said that the person I was trying to reach didn't exist. It was like something wanted to keep us all separated. I tried checking the game to see if there was information on it, but the disk disappeared, but not the ROM. So I started to play the ROM, but as I started, I could feel presence on my back, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It felt like breathing in my ear, and a cold shiver rolled down my back as I thought I could hear a voice. Sure, let another imp on Earth. Everyone who plays this game will just let more of us free. I turned off the ROM and deleted it. But even deleting my own copy, I knew that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of other copies out there. All because of me. It's been 2 weeks since I last played that game, and I think something followed me out of the game. I keep having sleep paralysis when I try to sleep. Not every night, but often enough that sleeping gives me anxiety. And I can see those black eyes watching me in the distant corner of the room. Food has been disappearing around my house, or it's been going bad sooner than it should. I bought a gallon of milk only for it to turn sour before dinner time. Electronics that I plugged in to be charged had suddenly been found unplugged, barely charging at all, so I kept checking them. But every time I check them, they're plugged in, and yet it won't charge. None of the technicians I take them to can even tell me why that's the case. And I feel anxious in my own home. It's better when I'm outside, but it still feels like it's following me. Everything that's bothering me is just annoying or aggravating, but they do add up, and I feel like I'm going crazy. Constantly sleepy, hungry, and with slightly failing tech can drive anyone to aggravation, but I don't know what to do. Contacting a hunter seems like it would be overkill, and the police certainly don't know how to exorcise an imp. Maybe I could try a priest, but the one time I picked up my phone with the intent to call a priest, I felt something sharp in my heart and my vision darkened, as I suddenly tried to call Vanguard. Thankfully, they got me to a hospital, but I had to have open heart surgery to remove a small iron nail from my heart. It wasn't nailed into my heart. It didn't pierce my heart. It was inside one of the chambers, positioned just perfectly enough that every time my heart squeezed, it would poke the walls of my heart without piercing it. It was agony, and if I didn't get help soon, it likely would have been fatal. The doctors had no idea how it got into my heart, but after a week in the hospital, I was finally cleared to go home, where I was supposed to heal for another 8 weeks. Even though I survived, the message from the imp was very clear. What it was doing right now was just playing with me, teasing me, pranking me, all for its amusements. But the moment I became a threat to it, it would react to protect itself. So now I'm stuck with this imp living in my house. I can't see it clearly except during sleep paralysis, but I still see it smirking at me in reflections, and I see its tail as it runs around corners. And I worry, deep inside myself, how many of these bastards have I released out into the world?